Welcome back, everybody, and happy to have you join me for this week's episode of Maximum Octane. This is Kim Hickey here, and as usual, and I always start out my shows, I'm so excited because of my guests, because I get to pick them. So there's really not a better gig in the world to be able to just like pick the people that you want to talk to or you are inspired by and say, hey, come and talk to me for a half hour or so. It's awesome. So joining me today is a colleague, Mr. Ken Martin, who has been very successful in helping get small business owners and collision shop owners on the right path to freedom and time and money and all of those things that we all know we don't know sometimes and we have to figure it out. So thank you for taking the time to join me today.
Kim, thanks so much for having me on. I can't wait. I'm ready to burst with all the information I want to share with everybody.
All right. Well, let's just get to it then, shall we?
Yeah, let's talk about metrics. Let's talk about a subject
Metrics.
something we don't talk about very often, right? This is information that is so vital to everybody in an organization, irregardless of what you're doing. Metrics are such an important part of a conversation we rarely have. We're so busy during our day trying to chase the things we think we need to be chasing and not realizing we're leaving a lot on the table because we're only as strong as our weakest link.
That's for sure. What are some of the reasons you think that businesses and especially small business owners really shy away from the metrics?
I think it's because they think they're sharing proprietary information. I think they're fearful that their people might know something that they actually need to know and they don't realize how important it is.
So what you're saying is if they don't tell them they made $200,000 this year, the employees won't notice that they rolled up in a brand new $250,000 motorhome. They won't see it. So by not telling them I got the money, they're going to completely be like, "Oh, bet you that motorhome was free." They know.
That is good.
Your internal customers know when you have
But
it's
isn't the goal for everybody to roll up in a new car?
it is, but we
That's what
try
the
to hide
metrics
that.
do. Oh,
The
no, but
metrics do
see,
it.
that's what the metrics do. So when rather than let them see $200,000 of my money, what if they saw it in the form of a metric that would really suit their agenda? Because let's face it, we all come to work with agendas. We didn't come to work because an ad said, "Hey, come be my friend." It said help wanted and good salary with benefits, right? We would hope that. And
I think that's what every ad says these days, but that's a whole other topic that I'm on a
yeah.
soapbox about, but that'll be maybe in the next couple weeks. So
So true. So true. That is another subject unto itself. But that being said, if you think about this, if I know my place, my skin in the game at a job, let's just say I'm an employee for a big company. I'm looking at my agenda, my world, my kids' soccer games, my house, my cars, the things that are important in my world. But how do I get somebody to convince me to incorporate what's important to me, what's important to them?
that is the $1,000,000 question and another one of my soapboxes. So
Okay, it's metrics. The key is
yeah.
metrics. Yes, because if I understand that I can have growth in a company by hitting certain metrics or certain goals that I know are attainable because my boss is coming to me and saying, "Hey, can you do this?" And I'm saying, "Yes, if you provide me with these things." And if that boss provides that employee with those tools and resources that they need, and together they work towards a common goal, everybody wins. And that will enable the strong to carry the weak. It's incredibly powerful.
It is. And, I think sometimes not sharing the metrics and not having conversations and not setting clear expectations works in the exact opposite effect of what the business owner intended. They think if they don't
Yes.
tell their people how much money they made, they'll just assume they didn't make any money. But many times, internal customers think you're making millions, more than you are. And it's all going in your pocket because they don't see a lot of times the back end because we don't share it. So they don't see how much insurance is and credit card processing and
Yes.
electric and all of those things. And many times when I have conversations with service advisors or any employee at any business, they're like, "Oh, yeah, we're doing X amount of sales a week. So I'm only getting paid this." So I know they're just pocketing all the rest. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, no, they're not pocketing all the rest. But they don't share it. They don't share for whatever
Yes.
crazy fear, and so it leaves so much to the imagination out there of,
Yes, it's cause and effect, right?
mhm.
Either way, either way, to the good or the bad. And on the good side, if I understood as an employee that I don't need to know your fixed and semi-fixed expenses and all the details on your P&L, I probably wouldn't understand them as an employee. But if I understood my part in a savings that would have incentive compensation tied to it as it relates to a metric, then I'm going to strive for that metric because I know that there's something at the end of the tunnel for me as well.
We do a lot of work, as you know, with employee engagement and culture, and the, two basic needs that people want to know, that need their needs are, I want to know how am I doing and what's next. And sharing
Yes.
the metrics just plays into that so beautifully, because they're always knowing where we're at. What is the goal we have to hit? Why do we have to hit this goal? And here's how you get to where you want to be. And we're not spending enough time, I think, with our internal customers asking what's important to them. Where do you want to go? Here's what's possible. How do I help you get there? What role do you want to play in this?
Yes, yes, and the world around us is changing, right? It's a living thing. It's evolving constantly. And today, obviously, the big word out there. I hate to say this word, the I word, inflation. It feels crushing on employees today because they're almost feeling like they had a demotion. What are we doing to talk to our internal customers, our employees, to address this so that they can actually succeed in a world where there's inflation?
Well, I could tell you from many conversations I had, and a few of them were just on the plane traveling this week. And a lot of people are not doing anything. We're burying our head in the sand and just,
Yes.
chalking it up to its political nonsense. And
Putting our blinders on.
yeah, it's crazy.
Yes,
So,
and they deserve so much more. And when they see you're trying, when employed, and I've done this numerous times in consolidation scenarios, in huge multi-shop operation scenarios, where we bring teams together as a whole, and nobody gets left behind. It's vitally important that everybody feel like they have ownership in a company. And when they feel that way, they will move mountains for success. It's really cool. I really enjoy bringing that message to the shops that I work with in my particular position as a collision advisor and a consultant and coaching and so much more. Where I work, it's more than just coaching. It's so big. It's huge. And to be able to bring success to shops that didn't think they had an opportunity is just it's a really good feeling.
can you expand a little bit on bringing everybody together and then letting them know that they can have a say and be part of it? Because sometimes as soon as you bring that up to a business owner, the doors slam and they're like, they're not running my company, they're not telling me what to do, I'm telling them. And so how does one find the balance between getting input from their internal customers, but knowing that, hey, the buck stops here. So if somebody has a crazy suggestion or something that goes against your values or your mission and vision statement, that it's okay to say no. There seems to be a one way or the other. We're losing sight of, there's a middle in there somewhere.
There is, and it all starts with change of culture. It's all about culture. It's that today things are so different, and I can attest to this because I come from that world, and I've learned from people. I've been blessed to be open-minded enough to say, you know what, I have to listen. Because if I don't listen, I'm not going to get the message. And if you come in with antiquated thoughts and you keep standing on that same old ground, trying to pound that same old anvil on that same old desk, you're going to be talking to deaf ears. But if you walk through your environment and you have a conversation with your people one on one, casually, and then you take that intel that you're getting from your people and you bring that into a release meeting and you utilize that properly, everybody starts to feel like they have ownership in the game because you're listening to their message. And I've learned things from some pretty smart people in this industry. These are not my ideas necessarily. This is my version of their ideas. And it works so well because people want to feel included. People want that badly. In fact, there have been studies done where it shows just a pat on the back would go further than a raise. That's incredibly powerful. Think about that. And if you can take that same message and turn it into, say, a better metric for that particular person in your shop, that will lead to a better metric overall for the company, which is healthy for everybody. So back
Th-
to my metrics, they're so important.
So, what are some of the metrics that you recommend that people share?
Okay, so depending on your company, obviously you're going to have to categorize and subcategorize your metrics, and they're going to have to be related to what each person does as it relates to their function in the business. In my business, for example, in collision, if I have body technicians and refinish technicians and structural technicians and mechanics, I can break out their metrics separately under one line, the labor line, and show each of them by their efficiencies how they're carrying their own weight. And then it becomes competitive. We are competitive by nature. So when you tap into some of the cool things people like to do and you make it fun and competitive, people will they'll bring some serious horsepower to the equation.
Okay, so there's a section of the world out there today that says it's not nice to make people compete or pit them against each other, and that it all needs to kind of be the same and everybody gets the what do you say to that? I'm going to just
Well,
be quiet cuz
I have to respectfully disagree with the fact that people shouldn't compete, because I think that brings out some really positive juices, so to speak. I think people want to compete, but friendly competition. It shouldn't, we have an obligation to our employees to keep it in a sane world, so to speak. But the metrics themselves are their metrics. So they're kind of competing against themselves anyway. And then as a team, they get to celebrate when they hit certain numbers. And you can give them a window so that there really isn't a place to fail, so to speak. This is the bottom we want to get to and make it very attainable. And here's where we really succeed. Where do you think we'll hit in that window? And it's fun to watch as you start to see the metrics change and go up, and they incrementally go up. And they can see those numbers week after week after week, month by month, quarter by quarter. And at the end of the year, you're having a barbecue out front celebrating everybody's wins, and everybody's discussing their incentive compensation, not to talk about salaries, but the fact that, yeah, for the first time in a year, me and the wife are going out and looking at a new truck. I can't believe it, but we're actually thinking of selling our house and buying a bigger house where we're going to think of having another kid next year. And all of those positive things that come from that. As a leader, I can't say there's a more rewarding feeling to hear those conversations amongst the people that you share your workspace with. It's just incredible.
it is, as you know, we're big fans of goal posters or vision boards or whatever anybody wants to call them. And it's so amazing and so gratifying for everyone involved that when a person in your tribe or group or whatever you want to call it,
My
in your
village.
circle, when they are able to cross something off of their goal poster and accomplish a dream or goal, it's magic. And to see everybody applaud them and support them and it motivate them to do more. We had one shop, ours actually Rod's Japanese in Washington. There was someone that had put on there, one of their technicians, they wanted to buy a house, they needed a car, they were trying to adopt a bunch of kids. There was something else, like if you looked at the goalpost, you'd have been like, this is a 10-year thing. What the all of the stuff that he had on there. It was a lot. And by golly, he accomplished all of it. I think a year and a half, I can't remember what. But the shop just
Yes.
lifted him. They were so genuinely happy for him. And they were adopting some foster children they were taking care of, I believe. And so they just got together and they were like, "Oh my gosh, I had to buy this big house." And then it was like, "Where's the furniture going to come from?" And the shop, the employees from the shop had a fundraiser and did a big giant yard sale and all kinds of things to raise
Yes.
money for their coworker to buy furniture for the house that they had to get for the foster kids. And it was such a just a beautiful experience
I
and such a
love it.
beautiful thing to see.
I've experienced that. I've experienced that down in Texas. I was a regional director for a major consolidator back in the mid 2000s. And we had a guy, not to be named, that was in the wrong position. That's all it was. And every day he would come to work angry. He was just not happy. He came to work unhappy, and it led to anger. He was frustrated. And I would visit this shop periodically, twice a month, because I was helping the general manager get his new shop up and running. And he was listening to all these ideas this company had. It was phenomenal. And every couple of weeks when I'd come in, this guy was just always, just really swearing under his breath at me. And I looked at him and I said, I go, what's your problem, man? Why? I like you. You're a really good guy. And he told me I wouldn't understand twice. The third time I said, we're done. Let's go in the front office. We need to talk. And I sat him right across from me, and I leaned over and I looked at him and I looked him right in the eyes and I said, look, just be straight with me. Just tell me what's really going on. And he almost got teary-eyed. And he said to me, Ken, he goes, I'm a better technician than any tech in that shop, and you have me disassembling cars. And I went, so you're better than any other technician in there, and you haven't told me this? Well, to take a very long story and turn it short, what you just said happened in his life. A year later, we sat in that same office with both of us in tears, and he was telling me how he had got a new minivan for his family, and they finally moved into their own home. And this all happened within a year's time. And yes, he turned out to be the best technician this shop had. And I can tell you right now, one of the other employees that I work at my company share this story with me.
Wow.
It's a wonderfully powerful. That's why I do what I do. Changing people's lives is so powerful, and sharing metrics with them is the key. Sharing information is the key.
So if you haven't done that before with your internal customers, what's the first place to start?
Release meetings, getting everybody on the same page, have a huddle and let everybody know we're going to take a direction and we're going to go slow. Be very, very careful to go slow with this. It's very powerful. And the first thing I tell them when I meet with them in this huddle or this meeting we have, I call them release meetings, is that I want to observe first so that I can get good intel, because I don't want to come to you and ask you a question that you won't have an answer for. I don't want to blindside you. So I want to watch what you're doing and then ask you why you're doing it that way and get an intelligent answer back, so together we can work towards a common goal of honing that skill and making it better, and that will in turn give us better metrics. We'll get better efficiencies out of what we're doing.
Wonderful. The next thing is sometimes business owners are like, we're going to do this great new thing. I'm going to start sharing my metrics. They roll out the first meeting. The first meeting might go a couple week meetings. They get busy, then maybe they don't have the meeting, or somebody pushes back and says, I don't think I should be held to that
It's a great
standard or
question.
whatever, right? And then it kind of goes a little sideways. So how do we make sure we keep that going? Because us business owners,
Oh,
and
this is a
especially
great
small ones,
question.
are we love to start things. We're entrepreneurs. We're idea people, and we're like, let's try this time. So how do you continue that?
I love this question. So what it comes down to is, when it comes to our own policing of ourselves, the fox is in the hen house, right? Right? We will determine the speed at which we go, which is never going to be one we're trying to achieve as far as I've ever seen. And so it's kind of like going to the gym. You have two choices. You can go and work out at the gym on your own and think you're doing great, or you can get a personal trainer that will take you to levels that you're really trying to achieve. So in the business world, it's the same way. If you don't have somebody in your corner that's constantly putting accountability into your world, that's constantly working with you to hone your skills so you can pass that message on to your team, your village, you're probably going to spend a lot longer working towards your goal, if you ever achieve it at all. So to answer your question, is coaching, personal training. That's what's important there. And if you have that, you will succeed.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay, here's the next part to that. We have all this going. We're like, listen, everybody, here's the metrics. You need to do this. Something that we seem to have shied away from in recent times, and maybe it's always been, is that trust but verify. We delegate when we can finally get somebody to delegate something, and then they're like, this is yours. You take control of this. You have ownership, and they wash their hands. So where does that trust
Yeah.
but verify come in?
Very simply, incentive compensation. Everything we do, we expect to be rewarded for. And the reward we expect in this world, the way our society is built, is through compensation, because compensation won't buy you happiness, but it sure does make your life a lot easier to live.
It'll
And
buy me a lot of shoes, I could tell you
that's
that,
right,
and
which will make
hats.
Kim happy, right? So, and in Ken's world, it would be mountain bikes, and everybody has their agenda, right? Back to agendas. So when you give somebody a task, like for instance, in our world, if we want a technician to train a new guy that's green, and I ask him to do it for the same wage he's earning, that's a demotion. But if I tell him, look, for every metric you hit, and here's the attainable ones, you tell me yes or no, are they attainable? Because I want them to let me know what they're capable of. Based on their capabilities, if we reach those goals, that will produce enough revenue to where we can sit down and have a discussion on the gross profit side of things and discuss how we can share some of that in the form of a reward for doing these things to better the company. And it sounds complicated on the surface, but when you sit down and you have a conversation with somebody mano a mano and you explain it to them in layman's terms, which is basically you help me and I'll pay you more, and here's how, they'll want to understand it and they'll have a greater understanding of it as they do it.
Sounds so simple, Ken.
It does, doesn't it? It's not.
Sounds so simple. Just why doesn't everybody do it? Dang it.
It is once you're doing it. Actually, Kim, now that it's muscle memory for me and the people that I surround myself with to do it. It is kind of simple for us. It is hard to change your culture. Culture is the hard part. I read a book once that said it takes a year to basically right your ship, and it takes 2 years to put a really good rudder and a compass on it. And I follow that rule of thumb whenever I take a shop over in my career in the past, and always told the people that hired me to fix their shops, because at one time I was a fixer, that yeah, it will take me a year to change your culture, and it'll take me another year to instill that culture permanently in your shop.
To add to that, people get frustrated because if they do try to make a change, and even if it's just in behavior, they expect everybody to notice in 5 minutes. And so if you have a poor culture or you have habits as a leader that are not desirable and you go to make a change, people are always upset, like, oh, I've been for 3 days being wonderful or doing this or that, and nobody's noticing. And there's so many different studies between anywhere I see from 6 months to a year and a half. It depends which study you read, that when you change a behavior, people won't notice for that long. So if you're the guy or gal that comes in 10 minutes early to every meeting, and you've been 10 minutes early for years and years and years, if you start coming in late or just right on the dot, it's going to take months till anyone notices that, because for so many years you are the 10 minutes early person, right? And so that, I think that's another piece where people stop doing things or get discouraged because it's not this immediate, oh, I stopped yelling and it's been 2 weeks and no one has said anything. And no, it's going to take a
So
lot
true.
longer, right? Until that new behavior, that new thing you're doing becomes then what is the habit or the muscle memory or what people expect, because there's a shift in the expectation, right? They're expecting
So true.
one thing, right? So it's always fascinating to me about the time limits that people be like, oh, yeah, I did it for a month, didn't work. We're going back to the other way.
Yeah, and you can incorporate that into the fact that owners and operators and managers of companies tend to be in a fishbowl. And your employees will do this with you. What you just talked about, they watch you intently and they will build a culture around your habits. So just like you said, nobody will notice the guy that might come in 10 minutes early every day for years, and then for months nobody notices he's coming in right on time. The owner tends to get that same effect in the opposite way, as to where people get comfortable with you doing all their jobs for them. And the more you do it, the
Oh,
more
yeah.
they'll allow you. It's an interesting way to look at a culture in a business, and it applies to any business. And owners tend to want to be the fireman. They tend to want to be the guy there to be there at the moment to rescue everybody. They get an adrenaline rush out of it, and that can lead to some bad behaviors. Actually, it can lead to some negative effect on the entire team.
It does. And one of the things I think that business owners that are firefighters don't realize, it can give off the perception of mistrust. And where you might
Yes.
think you're helping them out in a jam, because you see they're on the phone and someone came in, or you see cars packed up or whatever the business is, and you go out and help because you think you're helping and you're trying to help put out the fire. Sometimes that's perceived as they didn't trust me. Ken doesn't give me 5 minutes to get out there and do it. He gets out there and does it
Bingo.
before I do. They don't look at it like, gosh, that was so wonderful that Ken ran out there and did that. It has the exact opposite effect. So everything is perception, right? It's
It's their
amazing how
reality.
many
Yes. Yeah.
different ways we can look at things, and where sometimes we think we're helping.
You're so
All right.
perceptive. That's it.
So all of the years in your careers and your successes, obviously there's probably little bumps in the way and little
Oh,
things you had to maybe change and adjust and zhuzh up a little to go a different thing. What is a habit that you had, an unproductive one, that you were like, boy, this is not the best use of my time or energy, and that you exchanged for something more productive?
can you be a little more specific as it relates to changing my habit to be more productive? You mean with
Anything. For example, somebody had told me recently that they used to watch a lot of news and it was getting them upset, and they were whatever, and every channel
mm,
they turned on, it was a different news. So they were getting angry and then going into work angry and all of that because of what was happening. So they realized
yes.
that was an unproductive habit. They switched it to meditating, actually, and they used that time they normally would watch the news to meditate, and it
Yes.
helped do things.
Yes. So I'll use a more intense one, but I'm married 38 years. I'm very proud of that. And
Congratulations.
thank you. Just the other day, August 4th, right? And my wife sees qualities in me I don't necessarily see.
Good
And
ones or bad ones?
both.
Okay.
That was easy. But but really, she always tends to try to help me exercise the better ones. And sometimes I tend to think the world thinks like Ken Martin. And I have a message for anybody and everybody that's leading a team, and that is let them thrive. Let them show you how to go from point A to point B. That would be if I'm always looking for ways to correct Ken Martin, is to stop, quit thinking everybody has to think like me, and let them be creative. Let them be who they are. People will rise up and do incredible things when they're allowed to do it their way. So I would say that's how I tend to find better efficiency in my world.
Well, I bet you that was a hard one to change, huh?
I'm still doing it. I'm still doing it. I catch myself all the time reverting back to the old Ken Martin, and at least I have that to fall back on now, so I can continue to improve. It's a never-ending. You're striving for perfection with that one all the time.
We all have them, and that's why I love sharing them, because sometimes I think people feel like they're alone, or oh my gosh, that person's like superman or superwoman, and they don't, and everybody has something that at one time or another they're working on or trying to swap out for something more productive or whatever. So
And if I may, notice I reach to my coach. My wife, in this case, in my life, is like a coach to me sometimes. So I reach back and I get help. I listen to her advice. I think it's very important that we reach out to a sometimes a party that does have emotional skin in the game, like in my case with my wife. And then some things I reach out to coworkers and people that I know that don't have emotional skin, because I want a different opinion. I want a third opinion without the emotional side of it.
or
And I
you want
think
to
it's
prove your wife wrong. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm not saying that live. I'm just going to tell you that right now.
Okay, she told me this, so I'm going to go ask my coworkers. No, I know exactly what you're saying. It's important to have a support system, and
Yes.
you
An
mentioned
advisory
earlier
board, right?
an
Something like an advisory
advisory
council.
board. It's so
Yes.
important because many people have a million different ideas popping off in their head at any given second, and some are wonderful, and some maybe can be shelved for a later date, and some should not ever see the light of day. And so having someone in your corner, and a group of someone's that you can speak to and say, what I got this, give it to me straight. What do you think? What are the pros and cons? So
Agreed.
wonderful. Well, I thank you so much for joining me today and
Oh, this
sharing.
was
And I
great.
hope that everyone starts sharing metrics, because there's so many reasons that you should. And
Yes. Yes. And
don't
we
be
can,
afraid.
there's so much to learn about metrics. Don't stop trying to learn more about them. I mean, of course, it's just a small part of your world, but only once you have it down to a science and it becomes muscle memory. So it is hard to learn to use them regularly in your world, but once you do, it will free you up. It will give you the time you want, the money you want, the life you want that you've always dreamed of in your business if you work on them.
I love it. I love it. Too many business owners don't even understand all of the metrics of what it takes for their business, and
Yeah, it's
they
true.
gotta ask the questions. If there's something on your P&L that you don't know what it is, or why that number is that, or what's in that account, make sure that you ask the people that are working on your books, because it's important to understand, and you
It's
gotta
a
have
game
a
changer.
target.
It's a
Yeah,
game changer.
it sure is. Well, I appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm looking forward to doing this again, to be honest with you. This is great. This was fun.
Yes, I love it. I'm so lucky. I'm like the luckiest person in the world, I think, right now, with all
Oh,
my fun stuff I got going on. So,
I love it.
everybody, stay safe, make good choices, and stay inspired. And I will be back next week. Thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Kim.